We're moving on now to chapter 5. This is entitled Potential Energy, or Xi, and I would recommend that you look first of all to the introduction on pages 25 through 27, as well as on page 161 of the commentary. And here Menford gives us some reasons for why he's translating Xi the way that he is, and also about the roundness of the meaning, how many different things this can mean in Chinese, and how all of these are sort of are going to have some bearing on how the text should be read. So you do well to look at that again and study that. Just a few of the examples of translations he gives us are a situational energy, posture, a position, or a stance, and stance in a lot of different sorts of senses. Okay, so let's look at the text here. Master Sun says, managing many is the same as managing few. It is a question of division. Fighting with many is the same as fighting with few. It is a matter of marshalling men with gongs, identifying them with flags. And then he says, with a combination of indirect and direct, an army can hold off the enemy undefeated. So this is the first time where we encounter this idea of the indirect and the direct. If you look at the commentators, what they say is generally having to do with the idea of a direct attack being one that's straight on to the enemy, and an indirect attack having to do with the flanks, with attacking from the sides. Curiously, at least in Menford, his selection from the commentators doesn't mention the fact that indirect attacks can have to do with espionage and bribes, and these are both going to become themes a little bit later in the Art of War, and those are just as much indirect sorts of attack as an attack to the flanks. Next, I want to look at the passage where he writes, in warfare, engage directly, secure victory indirectly. The warrior skilled in indirect warfare is infinite as heaven and earth, inexhaustible as river and sea. He ends and begins like the sun and moon, dies and is born again like the four seasons. So one thing we notice here is that indirect warfare, or yin, is privileged above direct warfare, or yang. I understand this to mean that the skillful warrior already has knowledge of yang, or sort of direct warfare, and this can be complemented with yin, or indirect warfare, in order to make him a more capable, more total sort of soldier. He's going to be the master of both yin and yang, of direct and indirect, and moving in between these two. It's also important here to notice that, at least in this chapter, there are two ways of attacking. There's direct and there's indirect. If you can recognize both of them, then you can counter both of them, as well as their combinations, and then this will make you a master of warfare. And this is how I understand what he means when he says, in the dynamics of war, there are but these two, indirect and direct, yet their permutations are inexhaustible. They give rise to each other in a never-ending, inexhaustible circle. So earlier in this chapter, he'd given a few different examples of ways that this can happen. So there are 5 notes, but the combination of these 5 notes can make all of the music within a musical system that has 5 notes. So there are 5 colors, and yet their permutations, their blending of these 5 colors, can make all that we can ever see. And what he wants to say is the same thing holds with direct and indirect warfare. Once you understand these two, then you can understand all of the possibilities of what could happen. I want to give an example of another Chinese art. That would be the art of ping pong. So if we think about, you have your ping pong paddle here, and here comes the ball. This is a direct line where the ping pong ball is going to be hitting the paddle. Now, if the paddle takes a slight shift, if this makes this attack indirect, then the trajectory of the ball isn't going to go this way anymore. It's going to go from the direct attack, and then it's going to be deflected down into another angle. Now, the game after this point is going to shift radically. It's also going to shift as if the direct attack is followed up by a direct attack. So I think in some way this is what Sun Tzu is getting at, saying that you have to sort of be the master of both of these angles, and if you can master both of these, then you can control the game. you can return whatever is sent your way. Next, Sun Tzu gives us a series of metaphors. First he talks about water, and then he gives the idea of the falcon. Next is the crossbow, and then he's going to return again to warfare. So I want to take these one by one. First he writes, "A rushing torrent carries boulders on its flood. Such is the energy of its momentum." So if we think about water in a lake or in a bathtub or something like that, it's going to be still, and yet it's going to permeate whatever object would be in it as much as it can. So if you sit in water in a bathtub, then the water is going to get all around you and it's going to start to go into your skin as much as it can. Water also has the ability to acquire great momentum. So if we think about tsunamis or waterfalls and things like that, that would be an example of water's momentum. If it has if there's a lot of water and if there's a lot of momentum, it can be unstoppable. And we've had tragedies, natural disasters where we've witnessed that. The thing about water in an instance like that is it can use both this quality of permeating and the momentum in order to make destruction. So what it can do with the case of this boulder is if a boulder is sitting on land, it can use its seeping and permeating quality to go underneath the boulder into the dirt and then to uproot it and then send it along with momentum. What we then get is water, which has the ability to drown, along with a boulder which has the ability to crush everything that's in its path. So it takes its yin qualities and it adds this momentum to it, and then it also has the possibility to add in another dimension, this dimension of crushing something, which wouldn't be a quality of water all by itself. Next is the metaphor of the falcon. A sweeping falcon breaks the back of its prey. Such is the precision of its timing. If we think about a falcon flying through the wind, the falcon's going to use the gusts of wind to actually ride above and go higher, whereas it's also going to look for vacuums in the wind to sort of sweep down and get more momentum to go even faster. So again, we have this idea of the direct and the indirect, even in the falcon's flight. From its vantage point high up in the air, it can wait until its prey shows itself. So again, this is an art of war theme. Perhaps its hunger drives it to, perhaps the prey's hunger drives it to come out of its security and out of its hiding and into the open. The falcon wants to find the most direct route from the sky to the prey. So it doesn't want to have to weave through obstacles and shrubbery and trees and things like that, but it wants to find that the most direct means to pounce on its prey. When it seizes on its prey, it's going to go for the back first of all. So it's going to find these joints in the vertebra and break them with the impact and paralyze the animal at first, and then also squeeze it so that the rib cage, which actually has some elasticity. If you think about it, if you take a deep breath in, then your ribs are going to expand, and then you let it out, and then they shrink again. So there's an elasticity in the rib cage for us and for animals as well, that's made to sort of move with the lungs and protect the lungs, but it makes it somewhat weaker as well. And if these get caught in talons and broken, then these protective ribs become more like teeth, and they can puncture the lungs and hasten the animal's death. So we get this note that Minford gives us on page 169. This word "jie" that he is translating as timing also has to do with the joints in a bamboo stick, and I think that's interesting with this idea of that being the place where the falcon is going to seize upon, just like the vertebra, just like these ribs. It's going to look for these points. It's going to know the points that are stronger and the points that are weaker, and it's going to attempt to go for the weaker points and break them into two. So one important part, I think, of the falcon is not only the idea of timing, which is pointed out by Minford, but also the idea of this joint. So it's not just when, but it's also where it's going to attack.